Welcome back to the Body Composition Coach podcast. This is Jono speaking as always, but today I have a super special guest that I'm really excited to announce. And I've been looking forward to this one personally because it hits a subject that I talk about a lot, but I feel like Kathryn, who's going to join us today, can hit a new level of depth for this and really help you guys out with your sleep and practical takeaways you can use to improve your sleep from today. So I'm not going to say much more. I'm just going to hand over straight away to Kathryn. Kathryn, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you want to tell us who you are and what you do?
Hi there, great to meet you as well. So I'm Kathryn Pinkham. I'm founder of the Insomnia Clinic, which is UK's leading insomnia service. My background is in the NHS, so I worked as an insomnia consultant in the NHS in psychological services. So my background is therapeutic, and then I've focused specifically on sleep and menopause and sleep issues because it's I know, as you know, with a lot of your followers, it's such a big issue. So most of the people I'm working with they're having consistent sleep issues. So struggling to fall asleep, struggling to stay asleep, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a couple of hours, waking up too early before their alarm, and just feeling as though the quality of sleep is not good enough. So these are kind of everyday sleep issues that we're working with. It doesn't, when we say insomnia, sometimes people think, you never get any sleep at all, but it isn't that. It's kind of very normal sleep issues, but they still have a big impact. So the program of treatment I use is CBT for insomnia, for cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it is a specialized treatment specifically for looking at these type of sleep problems. So if any of those things, if someone listening is struggling with falling asleep, staying asleep, then this is going to be a good conversation with some really practical tips.
Absolutely. And I think I said to you before we started recording here, Kathryn, that one of the things I'm most excited about is we're not going to just be talking about have a cup of tea, have a bath, go to bed earlier. Like this is
No.
going to be some like deeper work, maybe some psychological work that people can do to like drastically improve their sleep long term, not just
Yeah.
like have a good night's sleep tonight, right?
Yeah.
Well, well, listen, thank you so much for joining me again. And I mean, let's start maybe there then with what is the difference between like I've had a bad night's sleep because the kids have kept me up or the dog's been barking or whatever versus like actual insomnia that you tend to work with.
So it's a really good question. And I think that in the media at the minute, there is so much talk about perfect night's sleep that I think we may have lost that concept that actually a bad night's sleep is really normal. So if there's a lot of stress, if you've got a lot of things on your mind, if you are hormonal, if you're not very well, all of those things would lead to a poor night's sleep. And it's completely normal. We are designed to cope with that. So I'm never working with people to create perfect sleep every night. That's not a goal that we would go for. It's a goal to be able to adapt to whatever sleep that you had. That's what we're looking at doing here. So everybody has the occasional bad night, but insomnia is different because it's a pattern. It's when someone is consistently struggling. Falling asleep, waking up in the night, it's become a pattern that repeats itself, and it's impacting how they feel during the day. So it's impacting your daytime functioning, but you're probably also worrying about it as well. So insomnia is when we're thinking about it a lot, we're trying to do things to make it better and it's not working. The odd bad night is normal. It's how we respond to that night that will decide whether or not this becomes a long-term pattern or not.
So obviously talking about patterns, I talk a lot about patterns in fitness and training and all that sort of stuff, but how would somebody specifically recognize a pattern? Because I think, a lot of us probably worry about sleep. If we've had a bad night's sleep, we probably do wake up and worry about that fact or,
Mm.
potentially worry about the impact of it. But like what sort of, like how would somebody recognize the patterns of insomnia and chronic bad sleep?
So insomnia is actually classed as the sort of official definition of insomnia is trouble falling asleep, taking longer than about 30 minutes to fall asleep 3 or more times a week, waking in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep, waking too early and impacting daytime functioning. And if this has been going on for longer than 3 months, then we would generally say that would be classed as somebody who is showing signs of insomnia. For me, generally, if it started to play on your mind and if you're trying to fix it and you're worried about it, that's enough to start doing things differently. And what I'm going to be talking about today is these practical changes that you can make really early that will actually just nip it in the bud. And that's the ideal scenario. That's where we want people to be sort of tackling it is early on. Saying that, if you've been struggling for years, it still works. We're retraining your body clock, and we can retrain it at any point in our life. You're never too old. It's never been going on too long. Everybody can improve their sleep as long as you're using the right tools and coming from the right foundations.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, what are then some of the common problems that people will come to you with initially? Because I know you work like one to one with clients. I think you have like a bit of a group program.
Yeah.
So, what are the most common things people walk through the door with, where they're like, right, I'm struggling, I'm waking up at 3 a.m., or you tell me, I won't.
Mm. So I would say the waking up in the middle of the night is probably the biggest one. So that's called sleep maintenance insomnia, where we don't have enough, it's a combination, we don't have enough momentum to sleep through the night. So we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. When we wake up at 3, most people tend to check the time, which then triggers, our mindset to start, wondering, have we had enough sleep? I'm starting to panic about tomorrow. What happens is at 3 o'clock in the morning, if we become vigilant to the fact that we're awake, then our body will think this is a problem and it'll have to respond as though there's a problem. So that fight or flight is kicking in. So
Okay.
most people that we're working with are in that pattern where they go, I'm absolutely exhausted, I've got perfect sleep hygiene, but I still wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't stop it. And that's because it's become a pattern. So your body clock doesn't know the difference between a good pattern or a bad one. It just knows the one that you repeat. So an example of that is if I was to set my alarm for 3 a.m. for a week, by next week I wouldn't need to set my alarm anymore. I just wake up naturally at 3 a.m. because I'll have trained my circadian rhythm to make that alteration. So
Hmm.
ultimately, when people are waking with things like hot flushes, or let's just say you got into a pattern of waking at 3 a.m. because you were under stress, which would be very normal, what happens next is that the trigger, we could take the trigger away. So we could get rid of the stress, we could get rid of the hormones, but you're still left with this awakening because it's a pattern now. So I would say that
Uh-huh.
sleep maintenance is probably one of the biggest issues. Sleep anxiety, so fearing, sort of anticipatory anxiety about going to bed and worrying about the impact it's going to have on you. Um, and people do have trouble falling asleep as well. So sleep onset, so feeling tired all day and then getting into bed, and as soon as your head hits the pillow, you're wide awake. So it's a classic sign of hyperarousal. So your bed is connected to being awake.
Hmm. I mean, there's loads of things. I'm sure people listening will be like, yeah, that's me,
Yeah.
and listing things off. Just one thing that I've just said, yeah, that's me too. You talked about almost like your circadian rhythm and how you can kind of create a pattern. So obviously, patterns create themselves, but you've almost said there that you can create a pattern for yourself as well in
Mm,
kind of the flip side. So I think something that I'll share is I used to always believe that like I'm not a morning person
mm,
and I can't train in the morning. And obviously, a lot of people listening to this podcast will be training and based around fitness and nutrition, those sort of things. But one of the things that I always told myself for years is I'm not a morning person. I can't train in the morning, and I never did. I've trained for coming on 17 years now. But in the last year or so, I've been going to the gym at 5:30 in the morning. I've been getting up at 10 to 5 every day, and it's almost like something that I've established recently. One of my clients asked me recently, and she said, "Jono, like, how did you do it? Like, how did you get yourself to this place of being able to go early?" And I'll be honest, I can't really answer it. I just
mm.
did it. But
Yeah.
I suppose you might actually know more than I do what I did there.
Well, I mean, your body clock, as I say, we know we can train it because that's why we can fly to Australia, and then after about 3 or 4 days, we get into that new time zone. So we can train your body clock. And when a baby is born, it's born knowing how to sleep. It's just not born knowing when or for how long. So people are naturally predisposed to a certain circadian rhythm. So some people are more morning people, some people are more night owls. And I do say where possible, work with your own rhythm just because it's easier. There's no point forcing something if that's not who you are.
Hmm.
But as you found, we can alter it. A lot of it is around beliefs. You just did it. As long as you don't have a really strongly held belief that you're not willing to challenge, we can change it. And that's what the program is about. Where you've set a pattern that's not working. So in CBT for insomnia, we're changing the behaviors that are keeping that pattern going. So a lot of what we're doing is whatever starts the fire, which is the insomnia problem, whatever triggers it, isn't the thing that we're focusing on because that's not what's keeping it going. It's how we behave around sleep and how we feel about sleep and our thoughts around it. That's what's controlling it. So in terms of just our body clock, if we take all of that away, we should be able to adapt our body clock within reason, to whatever situation we're in. It's just that how much anxiety that might create for us and what we believe.
Sure, and obviously, like the anxiety around it is going to be probably one of the biggest limiting factors, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I suppose when we're talking about the sort of people who are going to be listening to this podcast, they've probably got kids, or they have a pretty high profile job and they're pretty busy with things. Just life is busy generally, so they might be left with an opportunity where they can only go to the gym at five
Yeah.
thirty in the morning. It's the only slot per day that they can do it. So I suppose what would be encouraging to them is to know that actually even if they're not really a morning person, like if that's their only slot, they can impact it
Mhm.
somehow, right? In terms
Yeah.
of training themselves.
Yeah, you can train yourself into it. And it may be, as I say, if your circadian rhythm is you're not naturally a morning person, maybe it's always going to be a little bit harder for you than it might be for the next person. But with with the right sort of mechanisms in place, we can train ourselves to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And I think what would be really important for those people that you're describing, because a lot of people that I work with are that they're high functioning, they're very busy, and I think a reassuring message hopefully for those people is that quality is more important than quantity. So
Mhm.
8 hours of broken sleep is going to leave you feeling worse than 6 hours of quality sleep. So focus on the quality. Don't worry too much about how many hours it is. Let's just make sure that it's good enough, and then we can work on the hours. You can get a bit more, but for someone who's busy, rather than wasting time trying to sleep, let's just go to bed and wake up at a time that promotes really good quality sleep for you. And then if you can get up and fit time into train, then brilliant. So people waste a lot of time in bed trying to sleep, and a
Yeah.
lot of the work that I'm doing with people is around, let's take that portion of time that you're awake in the middle of the night and move it into the daytime because it's useful there. So 2 hours between 3 and 5 in the morning is a complete waste of time, but during the daytime you'd find that really useful to use. So that's why we're sort of looking at training your body clock to perhaps go to bed later and wake up earlier, but now you've got time during the day.
So actually, like one of the common things that we hear to improve our sleep, or one of the common things that maybe people focus on around sleep, is almost time
Yeah.
spent in bed, or they probably would classify it as time spent sleeping, but it's not always necessary that they are sleeping for that long, right? And I hear from clients all the time, "Oh, it's great. I'm actually getting 9 hours, so I don't know why I'm tired. Or I'm in bed by 9 and I'm not up till 6, so I'm getting loads and loads of time." But what you're saying is that's not actually the most important thing to be thinking about.
Yeah, so if I explain a bit about what controls our sleep, then that will lead us into like the sort of the timing. So three things control how well we sleep. The first one is our sleep drive. So if you think of this like an appetite, we build up this appetite for sleep. So we wake up in the morning, we start building up that appetite, and when we get into bed, the ideal scenario is that we fall asleep quickly, take back the whole debt that we built up, and we wake up the next morning and we feel better. So that's the ideal scenario. Um, the second thing that controls how well we sleep is our body clock. So it doesn't just control sleep and wake, but it's also controlling temperature, hunger, thirst, when we go to the toilet, all of those things in that 24 hour. And it needs to be in this sort of pattern where it knows what to expect. So what happens is if my drive to sleep, so let's say tomorrow I've got to get up at 4 a.m. for a flight, the temptation might be to go to bed early tonight. But in terms of my
Yeah.
sleep drive and my body clock, they don't know what's happening tomorrow. So my body clock goes, you've come to bed an hour and a half early. Haven't developed any melatonin. I'm not ready. This is not routine, so it's not going to work. And my sleep drive is saying, but you got up at the same time this morning. So now we've just gone to bed before I was truly sleepy. It doesn't work. I'm going to lie in bed. I'm going to toss and turn. I'm going to get even less sleep than I would have done if I'd just gone to bed at my normal time. So
Mhm.
that in terms of timing, what people tend to do is when we're sleeping badly, we go to bed earlier, we try and lie in if we can do, we basically create more opportunity to get back the sleep that we're losing, because that becomes our priority, is how can I get more hours. But actually, if you're somebody who's struggling to fall asleep or you're waking in the night, the first change that you would make is to spend less time in bed. So let's say you go to bed at 10, you get up at 6, but you're only sleeping for about 6 hours. What I would be suggesting is, okay, you can only get 6 hours at the moment. So let's create a sleep window, which is just the 6 hours that you're getting. And let's make sure that's really good quality. So, for example, we'd push your bedtime back to 12 and set your alarm for 6 a.m. So 12 till 6 is your new window. And then what will happen for that person is that drive is higher. So they're going to bed later. The drive to sleep is higher, the momentum is stronger, and then they sleep through that period in the middle of the night that ordinarily they wake up. So you can see we're kind of using a bit of sleep deprivation there to change your body clock. So for that
Yeah.
person, six hours of quality sleep in that way would be much better than the 8 hours of broken. So I don't know if you see that a lot with people you work with, but this idea, and it's been drilled into us since we were kids, to get an early night. But it doesn't
Mhm.
really work when there's a problem with sleep. It's not the answer. It's the worst thing actually that you could do.
It's funny, I was thinking about when, if I have to go to the airport really early or anything like that,
Yeah.
I probably have been conditioned over time or heard that information from somewhere as to like, right, you've got to get up at 4 a.m., which is an hour earlier than you normally get up. So you better be in bed an hour
An hour early.
earlier, otherwise you're going to suffer. But actually, what you're almost saying is, I'm making myself suffer if I get in bed too
Yeah.
early. and making that problem almost worse. And obviously, if that becomes a chronic problem for a lot of people, where they're just trying to go to bed earlier every night because they're struggling to sleep, you can almost see how that
It
pattern starts to become
spirals.
quite a painful one, right?
Yeah, because we don't have this unlimited pot of sleep to take from. We can't just take it whenever we want to, even if we feel tired. So, in that example of having a flight the next day, what happens is I go to bed early. My sleep is even worse than it would have been because I'm in bed too early. I've added too much pressure to it. I wake up all through the night, check the clock all night. Then the next day I feel tired and I start to get into a mindset around I've ruined this. I've ruined the trip. I'm going to be tired. I'm not going to have a good time. Or if it's a work trip, I'm not going to be able to perform. So what happens is we start to relate these negative consequences to the fact that we didn't sleep well. So now I'm going to go to bed early again tonight, but then we're in this cycle. So going to bed early is not the only thing that we do wrong, and we can talk about the things that people do, but it's one of the main ones. Is that combined with a lot of media telling us to have a long wind down routine and to make sure we're getting to bed early, it's just not the right solution for people who are struggling with their sleep. For me, go to bed later, enjoy your evening, do a bit of prep for tomorrow, spend time with people, read a book, watch TV. All of those things are far more beneficial for your mental health and for your energy levels than racing to bed at sort of 9:30, 10, if actually you're just going to bed because you think you need the sleep. It doesn't work like that. I wish it did, because then we could all just get the 8 hours, but it doesn't. So actually building up a stronger drive is the first step that we would be encouraging people to take.
So we probably need to talk about then what actually builds that drive, other than, well, kind of deprive yourself of some sleep. Because I suppose for a lot of people that will sound like quite a scary thought in itself. And I'm sure when you're working with clients, they almost say to you, Kathryn, what are you doing to me?
I'm
I'm not
tired. I can't go
sleeping
to bed
well.
any later. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why are you making me go to bed any
Yeah.
later? But I'm assuming you're not going to be talking about having a cup of chamomile tea and having a bath before bed, right? Like, we're talking about a slightly deeper psychological issue here.
Yeah, so for people who find that anxiety provoking, the idea of going to bed later, getting up earlier, there's a couple of things I would say. The first one is, remember, you aren't getting the sleep anyway. So this idea that it's a worse scenario than the one that you're in, it's not. It's the same. It's just less time in bed. So all we're doing is reducing time in bed, not time asleep. However, if it makes you feel anxious, which it does for a lot of people, then just go really gradually. Literally just go to bed half an hour later. Set your alarm 15 minutes earlier. You don't have to do it all in one go if that triggers anxiety and it's bothering to you. So you can just do it really gradually. So in terms of building up the drive, the only thing that we really that our body needs is to be awake. However, things that will help put us in the right place to sleep is, of course, if we are exercising, if we're eating well, if we're hydrated, and if we are managing our mind. So if you're 100 miles an hour all through the day and you're sort of stressed and you're hyper aroused because you're worrying about things and you're living in fight and flight, yes, having a stronger sleep drive is going to be helpful, but it can't overpower everything, which is why people will say, I'm exhausted all through the day, get into bed and I can't sleep. And that's because actually we need the two things to work together. If you think of like an accelerator and a brake pedal, the accelerator is your sleep drive, but the hyper arousal and the anxiety is your brake. And so it's going to slow it. It's going to stop it from working. So it's important to, but yes, be awake for longer, get up nice and early, get some daylight, and do those sleep hygiene, do those sort of lifestyle habits as well. But I think what's almost more important than what we do while we're awake is reducing that vigilance in preparation for bedtime. Because if you're stressed, if you don't make time to ever switch off, then your brain has to do it at some point. Therefore, it has to be overnight.
So when we say like removing the vigilance, obviously one of those things is, like you said, going to bed a little bit later and actually not like trying to force yourself into sleep. But obviously a lot of the common things people talk about are like having a tea, having a bath, those sort of things. So is there a place for those sleep hygiene things? We're not saying that they're not useful in any way, right? But it's just that they're not the cure.
But you're absolutely right. So absolutely, if you enjoy a chamomile tea, then it's perfect. If you relate it as part of your sleep routine, then there's no problem with it at all. Same with the bath, same with mindfulness or yoga or listening to a sleep story. If you relate it to going to bed and it's part of a short routine, there's no problem. The issue comes when people are going, okay, I drank my chamomile tea, I had the bath, I did my 15 minutes of bedtime yoga. Right, I'm going to get to sleep now. And then you're wide awake. So those things can't fix a mindset that is adding too much pressure to sleep. So I would just say you look at what you enjoy and do that, because there's not a one
Mhm.
size fits all. So chamomile tea in itself can't make anyone sleep better. But if you find it
Sure.
relaxing and you relate it to a period of your day which is winding down, then perfect. Does that make sense?
I think something that's just sprung to mind straight away from what you've said is almost like if you enjoy it, do it. And I
Mm.
think my immediate then thought process is, but I know personally for me, what I enjoy is watching like Netflix or something. It's like
Yeah,
my only opportunity in the day where I'm going to switch off. I
yeah,
work quite long hours. I start work very early. I finish work very late, probably like yourself. So actually, one of my moments of joy in the day is watching Netflix from maybe like 8 till 9 p.m. and
yeah,
then I'll fall asleep at 9
yeah.
p.m. But most people would advise against that, right? So
No,
how does that sit with you?
I disagree. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing whatever you want to do. You lead an active life. It's wind down. There's no problem with that. I disagree with the idea that we're supposed to be doing boring things before bed, or that you shouldn't watch something too stimulating. I mean, I just don't think we're not sleep is not that fragile. Um,
Hmm.
so for me, if your day is busy and then that 8 till 9 is your wind down period before you fall asleep, and it works, it's fine. It's, I guess, is more of an issue if you were to say I absolutely cannot fall asleep without Netflix on in the background. Then we'd be saying,
Okay.
okay, we've created a bit of a crutch here. We need to work on it, but it's part of your routine. So mine would be, you know, clean my teeth, put my pajamas on, and then I would read my book for 20 minutes. That's my routine and
Hmm.
it works really well for me. So the Kindle and the reading of the book is not putting me to sleep. It's just that I relate it to
Sure.
something that I've always done. So no, and you're right. Most people say that your pattern is not right, but I disagree with that. There's nothing wrong with doing what you enjoy in the evenings. Um,
So it's almost less about isolating these individual things as, oh, that if you look at your phone before you go to sleep, you're in for a
yeah,
world of pain this
no,
evening. Or if you watch Netflix before you go to bed, you're not going to bed, you're not going to sleep till 2 a.m. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, it might
mm,
negatively impact for some people,
mhm,
but actually there's a deeper issue going on here in terms of maybe their anxiety around sleep or
yeah,
how much pressure they're putting on sleep, and that's way more, that's almost like the bottom line for
it's
everybody.
more
And
important.
these,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
and I think that good sleep hygiene is it's the icing on the cake. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to improve, maybe improve the quality a little bit. It's the icing on the cake. It's not the thing that's going to fix it. So if you are having a consistent sleep issue, um, completely giving up caffeine if you only had one coffee in the morning is not the fix. That's not what's happened here.
Yeah.
Your body clock is out of sync. Your relationship with your bed has become about being awake rather than being asleep. So I think that in terms of an evening routine, relax and do what you enjoy. There is no specific things that have to be done. There's
Okay.
just things that you like, and of course, like if you I mean, to be honest, even the blue light evidence now is showing that blue light is not as bad for our sleep as people thought. What's more of
Okay.
an issue is if I spend all night with my phone here scrolling,
Mhm.
what's that doing to my brain? Or if I'm working, I'd say that's far more of an issue than the blue light. So that's just, just good lifestyle advice. So if you're going to bed early, but you're working right up until bedtime, I would say work up until that point, then go to bed an hour later and give yourself that hour off. That's a better
Yeah, yeah.
routine. So it's
So we
it's
don't
not
need to all buy those orange glasses that are going to protect us
no,
from the blue
no,
light.
save your money. We don't, with certainly the society we live in, since it became 24 hours and we're switched on, it does lend
Mhm.
itself to sleep problems, of course. But this
Mhm.
idea that we all have to be in dark lights 2 hours before bed, and if I glance at my screen, I'm not going to sleep. It's just not true. There's plenty of
Okay.
people with terrible sleep hygiene who sleep really well, and they might not
I
feel
would
good for
say
it, but they sleep well. So
I maybe wouldn't go as far as to say I have terrible sleep hygiene, but like I said, some things like the Netflix thing, for example, would probably not put me in the perfect sleep hygiene
mm,
category. But I'm actually one of those annoying people who does always sleep very well, and
yeah,
I'm almost ashamed to say it
yeah,
because
no, I don't think.
I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I sleep
Yeah.
really well all the time. I probably couldn't tell you why.
Well, interestingly, that's why you are a good sleepers don't do anything to sleep well. They just do what they do,
Mm,
and they expect that they'll sleep well, and they don't worry too much about it. Poor sleepers tend to have a long list of things they have to do. They have and I'm not calling them out on this because I understand it's horrible when you can't sleep well. What's happened is they've started to overanalyze sleep to the point where it can no longer just happen naturally. Whereas what you're doing is you call yourself a good sleeper. Your narrative around sleep is very healthy. You do something you enjoy in the evening that works for you, and that's all you need, and that's all any of us need to sleep well. It's that we become we add too much pressure to it. We're trying too hard. We're making it too complicated. And that
Hmm.
in itself is what's causing for us to get stuck in a cycle. I'm trying really hard. And the act of trying, and it's because sleep is one of the only things that the more effort I put into it, the worse it will get. So
Yeah.
when you're working with people who are high achieving or who are into sort of fitness, it's the opposite. The more effort you put in, the more knowledge you have, the better you become. And so sleep
Hmm.
is a difficult one for those types of people, because I'm saying actually your personality type and the way you would normally deal with this isn't going to work for sleep. You have to accept that sometimes you're going to get bad nights. You have to accept that you can't be perfect here. And we have to accept that the harder you try, the worse it's going to get. So
Sure.
we're encouraging people to come back. So we're going to look at your sleep drive, make sure it's high. We're going to make sure your body clock is set correctly. And we're going to look at reducing that vigilance. Those are the only three foundation things that we need to be looking at. Outside of that, let's move attention to things that I can control and move away from sleep. So the more you look into sleep, the worse it gets.
And I think just on maybe a slightly different side of things, because one of the things that I hear quite a lot from people, obviously we're talking a lot here about falling asleep initially in that first kind of, I don't know, from 9 till 11 p.m. But one of the common things people are probably screaming out right now, listening to this, is, yeah, okay, I don't struggle to fall asleep, but I don't stay asleep. So at
Yeah.
3 a.m., I'm up. And it might be to go to the toilet, it might not be. Some people experience it slightly differently. But what's the difference in waking up at 3 a.m. versus just struggling to go to sleep?
So the sleep maintenance, waking up at 3 a.m., again, it's that pattern. So the foundations would be the same. So go to bed later, wake up earlier, because that extra momentum is going to help you get through the wakening time. The other thing that you're going to change is you don't check the time anymore. So you're going to set your alarm for the morning, set your wake time, and stick with that consistently. And then when you wake in the night, you don't look at the time. So if you're using your phone for your alarm, you turn it over. If it's an alarm clock, you put it on the other side of the room, because we don't need to know the time. Your body is a clock. And the problem is, if you check the time, what happens is you are cementing that pattern. You're reassuring your body, we did the right thing. We woke up at 3:02 again, 3:02, 3:02. Every night it will carry on. So if you don't check the time, you lose that sort of rigid timekeeping.
Mm,
Secondly, checking the time will always trigger negative a negative thought spiral. So one of the things that we haven't covered is around the impact of this of negative thoughts around sleep and your
mm,
physiological sort of response to it. And so when someone wakes at 3 o'clock in the morning, the trigger could have been anything, as I said, hormones, poor health, bit of stress. But what happens is when I start to add pressure to that awakening, I need to get back to sleep. The message I'm sending my brain and my body is that there is a problem. And we only really have one problem response, which is fight or flight. So, fight or flight is your body's way of making you survive a situation. So, whether or not I'm about to get hit by a car, or whether I just got an email saying that I cocked something up, my fight or flight is the same. And that's
okay.
why we find life so stressful, because we don't need the same level of response to the email as we do to being hit by a car. So what happens at
Mm,
night time is, if I start to believe that poor sleep is going to, I'm worried about my health, I'm worried about my ability to cope at work tomorrow, or my ability to be a good parent, what's happening is I'm saying to my brain, there is a problem attached to sleeping. Be vigilant. Let's start scanning. Let's start preparing. What can we do to make this better? What can we do to guarantee it? And the problem is that exact process, the whole point of fight or flight is to keep me awake. It has to keep me awake and alert.
yeah.
So the way that I would encourage people to deal with that is, you go to bed later, you wake up early. So that now we're dealing with sort of your body clock, the function there of your body clock. In terms of your mind and your hyper arousal, we want to approach this from a couple of angles. So firstly is, deal with it during the daytime. So if you are somebody who wakes up in the night and you're ruminating, what I would encourage everybody to do is you grab a pen and paper some point during the daytime, maybe after you've had your dinner, and you write down everything. So it can be worries about sleep, it could be worries about something else, it could just feel like a to-do list. It doesn't really matter. What we're doing is you're saying to your brain, I'm listening, here's an opportunity, let's deal with it now. Because if you don't do
Okay.
that, it has to find it. And 3 o'clock in the morning is perfect because it's quiet, you're isolated, it's dark, there's nothing else to do. So that's the perfect slot for your brain to take. So what we're saying to your brain is, I'm going to give you a slot, but it's not 3 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And you write it all down. And then we can start to really get to grips with what's on our mind, because generally when you write something down, there's not hundreds of things wrong, there's a few things wrong. And when we write them down, we can do this exercise, which I really encourage people to do with sleep anxiety, is what on this list are real problems. And a real problem is, I have lost my job, or I am ill. Those are real problems that are actually happening. And the good thing about a real problem is you have an element of control over that. So I can make a plan. I can decide who I need to speak to, when, what angle do I need to approach this from. The rest
Mhm.
of your list and the majority of your list is going to be what if. So what if I get ill from poor sleep? What if I make a mistake at work and lose my job? And those what ifs, as I say, your body is really clever because I can respond with the same amount of anxiety by worrying about losing my job as if I had actually lost my job. My brain does
Yeah.
that to keep me out of trouble. I can imagine how bad it would be to put my hand in a fire, so I
Mm.
don't do it. That's how my brain is so smart. But
Yeah.
when it comes to sleep, what's happening is my brain is frantically going, okay, there's a load of possible terrible scenarios from lack of sleep here. I need to think about them all. I need to ruminate about them all. And then my body is in fight or flight. So what we do is with the what ifs, you acknowledge them. It's okay to be worried about those things. It makes sense to you to be worried about them. And whether it's real or not, it's real to you. So you acknowledge them. And I would really encourage people to just feel it for a bit. So if you are avoiding anxiety because you don't like the feeling of it, you avoid it by picking up your phone, by watching TV, by exercising, whatever it might be. Just spend a moment feeling whatever it is you're worried about. If I'm worried about my ability to cope tomorrow, just feel it for a minute because it's such a powerful way of saying to your body, this is really unpleasant and I am worried about it, but it's not life or death. And that's the
Mm.
distinction we need to make. So when I'm worrying about my flight tomorrow morning at 5 a.m., it's not life or death. And the way I teach my body that is by listening to what I'm worried about, reassuring
I think
myself.
what's
Yeah.
I think what's just really interesting about what you're saying is like these are things that I would use with clients generally when we're struggling with things like chronic stress, for example. I suppose I'd never really, from a coaching point of view, linked the two things to like waking up at 3. I suppose, well, I had linked it. Like I know if you're stressed and your anxiety's through the roof, you're probably not going to sleep very well. But
Yeah.
it's almost like dealing with like eating the frog, right? It's the thing. What's the
Mm.
actual problem here? Like a chamomile tea, having your room the right temperature, whether you
Yes.
watch TV before bed or don't watch TV before bed, like these are very trivial things. If there's this big problem in front of you, this stress, this anxiety that you have in your life generally, you probably need to tackle that. And actually, what you're saying about writing things down and almost, I don't know, compartmentalizing these
Yeah.
things or however you want to describe it, is do that during the day, and it will take away from
Yeah.
you feeling the need to do it at night.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at 3 o'clock in the morning, your cortisol levels are rising anyway. So your
Yeah.
cortisol is rising because it's getting ready to start the day. So what's happening is at 3 o'clock in the morning, not only is my cortisol rising, I'm not rational. Everything's going to feel a million times worse because I don't have kind of any happy hormones going on at that time. They haven't started yet. So we're just going to take the decision away from your brain and say, okay, I'll think about it during the day. Then what happens is when I wake up in the middle of the night, it's a lot easier to go, I have dealt with this. I have thought about this. So I think one of the biggest things we do wrong is we try and ignore things that make us feel uncomfortable. And it's because we don't
Yeah.
like feeling anxious. But when it comes to sleep, we have to acknowledge it. So you're absolutely right. If ultimately I have a deep down fear that if I don't sleep well, I'm not going to perform, therefore I'm a failure and I've let everyone down, no amount of chamomile tea is going to fix that.
Yeah.
But if I deal with that, then suddenly the chamomile tea could become useful because maybe I create a really nice routine which involves chamomile tea. So it's not that those things aren't useful, but you're absolutely right. They're not going to impact that. And the first step in dealing with any kind of psychological, root of an anxiety is to listen to it. And for a lot of people,
Mm.
that's enough. Just listening to what you're
Mm.
anxious about is enough because um, I give this analogy about if we were, if you and I were going for a walk and there was a cliff and I hadn't seen it, but you had, and you would say, tap me on the shoulder, don't go over the cliff. And then I ignore you and I start walking faster. You're going to tap me again, pay attention, you're about to fall off the cliff. I ignore you completely and I go even faster. By the time I'm getting close to that edge, you're frantic. You're doing everything you can do to try and get my attention now because I'm about to go off the edge. And then I turn around and say, oh, turns out it's just a mirage. It's not true. There is no cliff. And then we can all calm down. And that's what we have to do for our body is that your brain won't stop trying to make you survive. So if you don't listen to
Mm.
it, it's just going to work even harder to keep you awake all night because it's saying until you listen to me and reassure me that there's not a problem here, I'm not doing my job properly if I don't try and keep you awake. So that
Yeah.
hyper arousal, we can't ignore it. We have to lean into it. We've got to see what's going on. We've got to feel it, teach ourselves that it's massively unpleasant, but it's not life threatening. It's not life or death in this moment. And then at 3 o'clock in the
Okay.
morning, things are a lot easier to deal with.
And I think just linking it back to, like you say, the 3 a.m. wake up thing. And I was just thinking again about my sleep last night. We've got the dog with us here, and he woke me up in the night. And I'm just thinking he did actually wake me up last night, and I went back to sleep pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So it's not even so much the waking up that's the problem. It's the waking up, then starting to create those
Yeah.
patterns that we've just talked about, and then
Yeah.
panicking, and then starting to feel anxious about, am I going to get to sleep or
Yeah.
not?
It's the
So,
response. So it's the waking's not the problem. We all wake up after every 90 minutes. We're waking up after a sleep cycle, but you
yeah,
don't remember it because you go straight back to sleep. But if you attach waking to being a problem, so if your dog
yeah,
wakes you up and you go, oh, I needed to sleep well tonight because tomorrow I've got this on, that's it. Now suddenly my brain's in that fight or flight mode. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Waking is not the
okay.
issue. It's not being okay with being awake that's the issue.
So then this leads me to what probably, again, people are shouting down the screen right now, but menopause.
Hmm.
So one of the, or some of the common things that we see here is like, the sweats, or
Yeah.
struggling to sleep generally in menopause, right? Whatever the reason might be, there's a plethora of things. But does this follow the same sort of thing that we've been talking about, that it's not so much the sweats that are the problem, or it's not so much the waking up from menopause symptoms that's the problem, it's then the cycle that's created? Or is actually menopause a little bit different?
No, you're right. It is really similar. So what we can't come away from is that menopause, declining estrogen, progesterone does impact sleep. So it impacts it from a temperature perspective, and progesterone declining impacts our sleep because progesterone is generally sort of more of a sleepy hormone. It makes us more relaxed and more likely to sleep deeply. So when those are declining, there's no doubt that biologically we are in a more vulnerable place. So I guess there's two scenarios. We have somebody who, let's say we could completely take away all emotion and you were just going to struggle with the symptoms of it and you were going to wake up. What we could say is that we can't use CBT for insomnia to get rid of the symptoms, but what we could do is minimize the impact. So for that person, we'd still be saying, okay, don't resist that temptation to go to bed really early because I know you're exhausted, but it's not going to work. So let's make sure your daytimes are better for sleep. Go to bed later, wake up earlier. When you wake up in the night, we're going to have been managing the sort of the fears and the anxieties around it during the daytime. With hot flushes, we're going to make sure that if they're creating any panic, we're going to lean into that panic rather than try and run away from it. We're going to teach your body that a hot flush is not dangerous. It's just horrible and it feels
Hmm.
awful. So there's still, yeah, we would adapt the program to take into consideration the fact that your sleep is going to be disrupted by these things, but we're minimizing the impact. And what happens is for a lot of people, you can take HRT and it can really help the symptoms, but they're still left with this sleep problem. And that's purely because the behavior has taken over and we've now got this sort of broken pattern, which is great because we can fix that pattern. So HRT is a really good solution for lots of people, but if it doesn't fix your sleep, don't worry. It's not because it hasn't worked. It's just that menopause started the fire, but what we're doing is what's keeping it going as well. So we take the HRT, we work on the behaviors and the thoughts alongside it, and then we can get your sleep back into a good position. So I think when it comes to
Yeah.
menopause, there is a certain level of acceptance that it's frustrating. You can cope better than you think, and there are things that you can control. So again, it's back to that sort of what's in my control and what's not. But the
Hmm.
basics of a CBTI program are really useful for menopause because we make those mistakes. We go to bed too early. We try and have a lie in. We're perhaps having a nap. We're perhaps having perfect sleep hygiene. You're driving yourself mad by not doing anything you ever enjoy again because you're so worried about sleep. So we can get rid of all those behaviors and bring a bit more sort of relaxation and enjoyment back into it so that sleep doesn't end up being, the main focus and priority.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm aware that you generally, like myself, a lot of your clients are in menopause, or
Yeah.
around the kind of menopause window. So, is there something that those people particularly need to know, other than kind of what we've said, that this does come back to potentially the patterns that you're creating, the anxieties, and the pressure that you're putting on sleep? Is there something that they need to know specifically that might be a little bit different to somebody else?
That it's normal, that what you're experiencing is happening, and therefore trying to force it otherwise is not going to be the solution. So as I say, at this certain level of sort of acceptance that if you are having hot flushes, they probably are going to disrupt your sleep, but you can cope with it better than you think. So if we
Hmm.
work on the mindset around that and the anxiety, um, then what in menopause, what we want to do is we want to make sure that sleep is not becoming this sole focus, and it can do
Yes.
because it feels so detrimental not to be getting it. But we have to come out of this kind of catch 22 that the more I focus on it, the worse it gets. So the more I focus on it, we have to step out of that. So I
Sure.
would say it's normal. What you're going through is completely normal, but we can change how your body responds to it. It doesn't need to be red alert at 3 a.m. We could be in a scenario where you wake a couple of times a night with a hot flush, but you're back asleep within 10 minutes. And that would
Hmm.
be okay. That would be good quality sleep. So that's what we'd be aiming for there.
Okay. I suppose something as well, just that I've heard quite a few of my kind of menopause clients talking about is magnesium, and starting to take that during menopause to help them sleep. And actually, just maybe outside of menopause, just people generally talk quite a lot now about
Yeah, magnesium.
magnesium and how that helps. Is that something? I mean, I'm a fitness professional. One of the things that I'm quite passionate about is not patching things up with supplements. Like, if something bad is happening or something less than ideal is happening, there's probably a problem that needs to be fixed there. And supplements often people use to patch things over. So potentially you're going to tell me the same thing here, but is magnesium just patching over the actual problem, or is it actually helping at all?
So I think it depends. If you're deficient in magnesium, then it could certainly be having an impact on poor sleep. It's a bit like the sleep hygiene that we've talked about. I I haven't worked with anybody who has fixed a consistent sleep issue just by taking magnesium.
Mhm.
But if you get your sleep drive in order, if you regulate your body clock and you're dealing with this hyperarousal and you took magnesium, then that could improve the quality. So for me, it's not going to fix everything. It would be really, personally, I haven't worked with anyone who says magnesium was the entire fix.
Yeah,
I always encourage people as well, because the thing is, we get hammered with so many different ads for supplements and things. I would say just get
yeah.
tested and just see, are you even deficient in it? Because if you're not, then we don't want to take it. So there's certainly no harm in it at all, and it is good for lots of reasons. Magnesium is good for lots of things. Is it going to be the one fix when you're somebody who's consistently waking at 3 a.m. with a lot of anxiety? For me, probably not.
I think it's interesting because, again, that kind of demographic of person that we're talking about here, females between the ages of, 40, 50, 60, in that kind of potentially in menopause, perimenopause, they are marketed to quite a lot, right? And
Yeah.
potentially you probably see this with your clients. And it's something that I talk about and people talk about quite a lot anyway. In general, it's not something I made up, but like pink tax, for example, and
Mm,
how, they will create a supplement that specifically speaks to people who are hurting. Like, that is marketing in general, right?
yeah.
It's what problems do people have and what can we promise to fix, and how much pain are they in, pain
Mm,
potentially being not sleeping, and therefore, how do we market our
mm,
supplement to them or
yeah.
whatever. And I think something I see quite a lot of is almost these, if you're struggling with menopause and you can't sleep, you should definitely be taking this supplement. And why are you not? This will
Mm,
solve all of your problems. I suppose, I don't know, is that something you have to fight
mm.
against quite a lot?
And I think a lot of it is just education, that, the stuff that we're talking about today is free. If you go to bed later,
Yeah.
wake up early, if you start to deal with your anxiety around sleep and regulating your body clock, that's all stuff that people can do. You don't always need more support with that. I would say get those things in place first before you buy anything else. Of course, if your mattress is uncomfortable, get a new mattress. But the reality
Yeah.
is your mattress is not the reason that you're sleeping badly. So I think you're absolutely right. It's a minefield. Everybody's looking for a fix because it's such an awful time. You're feeling as though you've lost control of your body and your mind to a certain extent. So you will pay to get it fixed. But I think it boils down to education. We need to make sure that we are fixing the right things with the right treatments. And for me, a pill or a supplement is not, when it comes to insomnia, that's not a proven evidence-based route. For somebody with just a little bit of
And
a sleep issue who's not getting good quality, maybe, but that's not who we're talking about here.
yeah, and this actually is very relatable to the last podcast that I released, which I was talking about GLP-1s and Mounjaro
Yeah.
and things like that. And don't worry, I'm not gonna get deep into that subject. So no, that's not what you're here to talk about. But I think what's really interesting is the message I was giving out in that podcast was about how these are a tool, and do they help you lose weight? Absolutely. Are they for the right person? Helpful, 100%. But if you're not working on the deeper things, the deeper reasons that you struggle with food
Mm.
noise, the deeper reasons that you struggle with exercise or nutrition or whatever it might be, then ultimately you're not really fixing the problem. And later down the line, that's always going to keep coming back to bite
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah, it's a sticking plaster, isn't it? I think that's how people get caught up in a long list of sleep hygiene, because if you get everything right and you sleep well, you go, brilliant, I found the formula. But the problem is the very nature of thinking I've found the formula adds too much pressure, because then it doesn't work again. So I think you're right. There are certain treatments that are right for certain conditions, and you can take sleeping pills. You can do things that kind of force sleep, like a sedation,
Mm.
like a Zopiclone or whatever. But ultimately, if we're not dealing with the underlying issues, it's not going to go away. And I think one of the things to reassure people about sleep is you don't have to be in therapy to deal with your sleep. You don't have to go back to all these sort of deep, dark anxieties that you've got. We just need to start acknowledging them. We just need to start doing a bit of work around them, and that can take the power out. Because, if I
Mm.
have this sort of like unconscious belief that if I don't sleep well, I can't cope, in a short space of time, I can do a bit of work on that. Well, I do cope. What does coping not look like? Sorry, what does not coping actually look like, and how close am I to that? Actually,
Sure.
I'm probably about a 5 out of 10. I cope pretty well. I'm just tired. So even that reframe makes my body go, okay, so it's not life or death. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of work that people can do that. So it doesn't have to be deep, long-term, one-to-one therapy. It's just about retraining your body and your
Yeah.
mind to sleep well.
I think something that I talk to clients a lot about is almost like the first step to pretty much everything is actually acknowledgement of it,
Yeah,
and acknowledging that it exists and it's there and it needs to be dealt with.
yeah.
I think you're probably you're in this industry, you know better than me, but I think people are probably more aware of sleep
Mm,
than they maybe ever have been. And I
yeah.
think one of the things that comes with that is all these wearables. I'm thinking Aura rings, I'm thinking Apple Watches. I'm wearing one of them
Mm,
now. How how useful is that? Because from my experience as a coach, a lot of people will come to me and be like, "Oh, I've burnt this many calories in my workout," and I have to almost poo-poo it straight away and be like, "No, I'm really sorry, you
mhm.
didn't. I know your wearable says that, but that's not really very useful information for us." Is a wearable useful at all for tracking sleep, or not really?
I don't recommend them. I don't.
Okay.
I think it's useful for somebody who enjoys data and doesn't really have a sleep problem. I think it could be quite useful and quite interesting. If you're somebody who likes to, beat your score type of person, then it could be interesting. For
Hmm.
me, the very idea that you would get scored on how well you'd slept is going to create a massive amount of anxiety for a poor sleeper. So if you wake up, you
Mm,
check it, you slept badly, I didn't get enough deep sleep, and then it's telling me don't work out today because of this, or go to bed early tonight.
mm,
My biggest issue with trackers is they're not then delivering an evidence-based method to treat the problem. So there's no point in continually highlighting to somebody with poor sleep that you have poor sleep. What you
yeah.
now need to do is tell them from an evidence base what they could do differently. So for me, when I see that it's, go to bed early tonight, there's no evidence in the world that suggests that going to bed early was the right solution for somebody who was awake with anxiety all night. So that's what I
Mm,
find frustrating. It's like, why are we highlighting it if we're not going to then help you treat it? All we're doing is creating more anxiety. And, health insurance companies are even sort of like offering people incentives for having good sleep scores, which is great
yes.
if we were all just not bothered about sleep and we weren't prioritizing it. It's like, we can incentivize someone to exercise because it's up to me if I exercise or not. It's not up to me
Hmm.
whether I sleep well or not. So for me, it's just we're adding so much pressure on somebody who already realizes they've got a problem and can't do it, yet we're not telling them how to do it right. So
Yeah.
for me, tracking is a waste of time, and it's just going to. And I don't, there's massive variations in how accurate they are. It's not the same as a sleep study. Whatever they say, they're not the same as a sleep study.
I think something that I talk about quite a lot with clients is that internal monologue thing that you're talking about here. Is there a possibility that potentially someone wears a wearable and they wake up in the morning and before they've even almost got in tune and in check with how do I actually feel? Am
Mm.
I tired? Am I alert? And all of these different things that we probably should be doing. Is there a possibility actually they're looking at it and being like, Apple Watch says it's a bad night, so today's going to be a bad day?
100%. So it's a condition called orthosomnia, which is that
Hmm.
where you are creating anxiety and perfectionism over your data. So a good study would be if I gave you false positives and told you you'd slept really well, how would you feel today? Compared to reading it
Hmm.
and seeing that you slept really badly. Because one of the biggest messages that I give to people I'm working with is however badly you slept last night, just get on with your day. Because if you get on with it, you
Hmm.
get up, you exercise, you see people, you do it. You can then say to yourself, even on a really bad night's sleep, I can still manage, I can still cope, I still have good periods of the day. Whereas if I buy into it and go, I'm just going to sloth around all day, I'm going to cancel all my plans, I'm not going to go to the gym, then all I've done is prove to my body you can't cope when you haven't had enough sleep. You had a bad day because you didn't have enough sleep. So absolutely, it's a real condition
Hmm.
that people are reading too much into their data and then deciding how they feel. When actually you
Yeah.
just decide based on how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the last kind of itching, burning question that I have here, and again, I'm thinking about client real world scenarios, is alcohol. And
Mm.
I've heard you talk on this before, but I think it'd be very useful for those listening. And when we talk about alcohol, I think the question generally, and I don't know why it's phrased like this, but it usually is how much can I really get away with? How much of a poor impact is it actually going to have? You know, if I just have that one glass of wine on an evening, you know, is that really going to make a difference? So I suppose I'll put that to you. Can
Oh.
you get away with some? Like, will all alcohol have a
Yeah.
negative impact in
So
some way?
it's so funny. I'm always hoping to turn on a podcast where they go, actually, alcohol's fine. You can take it. I think, I mean, it's so individual. Like the reality is, alcohol does impact how restorative your sleep is. So if you've drunk,
Mhm,
your sleep will not be as restorative, and you will feel more tired the next day. So we can't really get away from that. And certainly when you're through perimenopause and menopause, it's even worse. Your declining levels of progesterone, estrogen, and your liver's ability to sort of metabolize, it's not as good. So you're going to feel much worse. I personally don't buy into that you have to give it up. Like if you want to and you're really dedicated to a healthy lifestyle, then brilliant. I love that for those
yeah,
people. If you are somebody who goes, I just enjoy the odd glass of wine, I don't want to give it up. I think it's part of enjoying our life. And I've worked with lots of people who've given up everything they enjoy in a quest for perfect sleep,
sure.
when actually we also need to look at your enjoyment levels and your mental health, and what's the point of actually being alive. You know, just getting good sleep every night but having to give up everything for it doesn't feel worth it to me. So
Uh,
I think just go in with your eyes open. Look, you know, if you drink too much, you're going to sleep badly, and it's going to be a problem. If every now and
mhm,
then you have a glass of wine, just don't buy into it. If you sleep badly, you've slept badly. It's your own fault. Don't worry about it. You don't need to
mhm.
go to bed early. You don't need to overanalyze it. Just accept you're going to be a bit tired the next day and move on. So I think that's the main thing. Is don't respond to it with panic. You slept badly because you drank too much.
And
Um,
I know it's more complex than this, but ultimately the advice here is if you do have a couple of glasses of wine and you do maybe sleep not to what your 100% your best capable
yeah,
ability, it is very much a case of let's not overthink that the next day.
yeah,
And like I say, I'm sure it's much more complex than
yeah.
that, but it
That
is a case of
that's my take on it. Yeah, like.
yeah, okay,
And you know, if you were sitting with a sleep scientist, they would be able to tell you all the reasons why actually it is so bad for us.
yeah,
I guess I'm talking to people who know, like me. I know that having a glass of wine is not good for me, but I also know that on a Saturday night I quite want to
you're
do
gonna
it,
you're gonna do it.
and I don't, and I'm
Yeah,
okay with that. So I think
yeah,
it's up to us as individuals to decide what are the areas that we're going to be happy to,
yeah.
not do what's necessarily perfect. Because uh, I don't know, more than ever at the minute, it does feel like we are sort of being hammered by how to live perfectly. And
Uh,
um, I work with lots of people who do everything right, but they're not happy and they're not refreshed, because if we're stressed, if we're, anxious all the time, you can't outsleep that. You can't outsleep
uh,
stress. 10 hours of sleep a night. I'm somebody who actually, when I'm stressed, I sleep a lot, but I don't feel any better
uh,
for it. I don't wake up feeling refreshed. I'm still tired.
uh,
And I think that for some people, that's quite shocking that actually they improve their sleep and they don't feel any better for it. And it's like, because actually we
uh,
can't avoid the fact that you're stressed and you're not very happy. We have to work on that as well. So I'm not for a second saying that, having a glass of wine makes you happy, but as part of like living your life and enjoying it, I think we have to be balanced.
yeah,
Is it going to make you
100%.
sleep
And
worse? Yeah, annoyingly it is,
that's,
but
it's a question that I get all the time. It's like, Johnny, do you think I should stop drinking, or do you think I should give up that takeaway I have on a Saturday, or do you think I should be getting up and doing the 5 a.m. gym session even though I don't need
oh,
to, and doing hard things for hard sake? And the answer is to everything in these conversations is, well, it depends. Like, what is the
what's
impact?
your priority? Yeah.
What's the positive impact for you, but what's the negative impact on like the other things you enjoy, right? And basing everything around the perfect biohacking or health state that you can possibly be in. Of course, being healthy for everybody should be one of their priorities in some way, whatever that looks like. But actually just tearing everything you enjoy from your life in search of this perfect
Yeah.
situation, health situation is actually could be detrimental, right?
Yeah.
Maybe plays
Yeah.
their overthinking of things that
Yeah.
we've been talking about today.
Well, it's trying to kind of control everything, isn't it? If I can get everything perfect, I will feel 100%.
Mm,
The problem is we don't know what's going on in our body. So you get everything perfect and then you don't feel 100%. Now where do I go? I've got to add more things to this list. And I think that's kind of what's happening is people are doing and taking so much, it's going to be quite hard to work out what was having an impact. So I think we just,
yeah.
with sleep particularly, we just need to simplify it, just go back to the basics. And I'm sure
Mhm.
you find the same with exercise, that, there's a million and one things people could be taking and doing and following. But sometimes we just need to just clear the decks a bit and go back to basics and just work out what you enjoy and what you're actually going to stick to and do that.
Absolutely. And that is one of the main questions I get when people come into our program. It's like they're expecting this groundbreaking new thing that they've never heard
Yeah.
of, but actually quite often we go back,
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's very much the same for you, is we go back and we tear it all down, and we're like, right, let's start from the very bottom here, the very basics, and let's get those things right, rather than looking for this holy grail of something
Yeah.
that you think you're missing.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely agree.
Um, so I suppose before I kind of ask you where people can hear about you, because it's really important that they can hear more from you, because this information, obviously, for a lot of people listening to this, will be new information, and will have a huge impact. But if we're to give people, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, whatever you decide
Mhm.
is applicable, 3 things that they can take away today and actually implement from today and have a better night's sleep. I don't know, maybe from this
Yeah.
evening or maybe
Yeah.
from later this week. What would you say?
So I would definitely say tonight, if you are somebody who is spending time in bed, not asleep, and you're kind of, you're aware you've got a window of time in bed, but you're not asleep for much of it. So tonight you go to bed later, whatever feels comfortable for you, push your bedtime later, and you're going to set your alarm for the morning. You're going to not look at the clock. So when you wake in the night, you're not going to look at the clock tonight. And that, again, it's not an overnight win, but it's something that over time becomes part of the better, healthier pattern. So you're not going to check the time.
Mhm.
Um, After you've listened to the podcast, get a pen and paper, write down what is your narrative around sleep. Really dig deep. What am I actually worried about the consequence of not sleeping is? And the way you can do that is, what is my worst case scenario here? Okay, well, I lose my job. So what? Ask yourself, so what? So what? Okay, well, if I lose my job, I can't afford to pay the mortgage, then I haven't got anywhere to live, then my kids are going to get taken off me. Okay, now we know what you're really worried about. You're worried that you're going to let
Mhm.
everybody down and that ultimately you're going to lose your kids. Now we can work with that and go, okay, well, actually, let's put some things in place. What would I realistically do? Where would I
Mhm.
turn to? Who would I get help? So just run through the worst case and find some solutions to it, face it. So start that process of writing things down every day. And you'll notice the impact, the therapeutic impact it has at bedtime is that you've dealt with it. So you're going to go
Mhm.
to bed later, wake up earlier, you're going to set your alarm for the morning, you're going to stop looking at the clock in the night, and you're going to start writing down writing down the things that are on your mind. And then the last one that we haven't really covered today, but which is a big one too, is if you are wide awake at any point in the night for whatever reason, and you're wide awake, you're stressed, you're wound up, you're hot and bothered, you're ruminating, just give up, leave the bedroom, go downstairs, watch TV, read a book, do something you enjoy, and go back to bed when you feel sleepy and calmer. Whatever happens, get up at the same time the next morning. So
Mm.
that people will say, yeah, but that's not helping me get any more sleep. It's not helping you get more sleep, but it is protecting your relationship with your bed. If you're spending
Sure.
hours on end in bed, wound up and frustrated, your bed is now a cue for that. That's how your bed is going to make you feel when you get into it. So just
Mhm.
give up. Go downstairs, enjoy being awake, enjoy reading a book, enjoy doing something that you don't have time to do, and then go
It's
back
not
to bed.
helping you with your sleep, but neither is laying there awake, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And people always go, well, at least I'm resting. But then I would ask them, well, how restful do you feel? Because you're not describing
Mm.
rest, you're describing frustration, anxiety, irritation, ruminating. That's not resting. So just give up and get out of bed.
I
So
don't think
again,
I've
it's not
ever
something that you
spoke.
want to do every night, but it's something that you do when you've got no other, option.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've ever spoke to anyone who said, "Yeah, no, I couldn't sleep last night, so I laid there awake and I just felt so peaceful with it."
Yeah, I was so happy with it.
It's not really something that people say.
No, no, it never is. And it's funny because everyone always thinks that about themselves. They go, yeah, but I'm resting. And I go, yeah, but you're not. You didn't describe resting. So
Yeah.
go to bed later, wake up earlier. And if you are awake at any point feeling bad, leave the room because there's no point staying there. But the problem with sleep is once we're in a battle, we can't win it. So if I'm battling to get back to sleep, if I'm trying to force myself to sleep, I'm not going to be able to
Mhm.
sleep. What I can do is focus on being grounded in that moment. I could notice what I could smell, what I can feel, what I can hear. Those are things I'm in control of. So I can focus on grounding my mind in the present moment. And the impact of that may be that I will fall back to sleep. What I can't do is focus on getting to sleep because that
Mhm.
is a cycle that I just would get stuck in. So for anyone who's trying to sleep, move your trying over to being grounded. Can I be in this moment? And that
Okay.
is more likely to lead to sleep.
I think that's definitely just something you said there is my biggest takeaway from today is that battle with sleep and
Mm,
almost, putting the weapons down and
yeah.
trying to work in sync with sleep and not trying to force sleep, and, maybe better quality sleep and shorter sleep can be better quality sleep, rather than trying to think like more is better or
Yes.
more is more. It's
Yeah.
actually
Quality, not
better is
quantity.
better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Quality is going to make you feel better than the quantity. So
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
absolutely focusing on that. So yeah, I think there's some really practical things that people can take away. And I'm not saying that they're easy, but they are simple in terms of what they are and how they work from a
Yeah.
scientific perspective. The biggest thing is always the anxiety side of it, but the first part is just starting to write it down, acknowledge it, notice it, and start working
Mhm.
with yourself. Be on your own team. Don't tell yourself you're being silly. Don't say you're being irrational. You're not. Your brain thinks there's something going on here. So listen to it and let it tell you what it needs to tell you, and then it gets a lot easier.
So I think a lot of people will be resonating with loads of the stuff you've spoke about today. I personally am, and I'm somebody who sleeps really well. So I'm sure
Yeah.
anyone who doesn't sleep well
Yeah.
is sitting there thinking, they've really resonated with this and they can recognize themselves in a lot of these problems. So they're going to be itching to know where they can hear more from you, where they can potentially work with you. I know you have a program you coach similar to myself. So do you want to just talk me through where can people hear more from you and how do people work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is theinsomniaclinic.co.uk. The Sleep Well Live Better program, got a Sleep Well Live Better program and a menopause program. They both work in the same way, that it's a 4-step program. So not 4 weeks, but 4 steps, because everyone is different. It depends how long you need to work on each section. You join the course. There is on-demand videos, so recorded like we're chatting today. It's sort of a very laid back approach where I'm running through all of the stuff that I would do in sessions with people, because as I said, you don't need therapy for this. You just sometimes need to understand it. The biggest selling point of the course, and the reason we have so much success with it, is that I run a support group. So anybody who joins has the opportunity to ask questions as much as you need to. If every day you need to ask me something, you can, and I'll come back to you. So it's a self-directed program, but with lots of support. And it's been really effective. 96% of people we work with have seen improvements in their sleep and have found it really helpful. So it may be that we're highlighting that actually anxiety is a big issue for you, and you're going to need to do a little bit of extra work on that. But generally, the program is enough for the vast majority of people to start getting their sleep on track. And we can help you with the other. We can help signpost you for the other things as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually just getting these foundations in place, it's the best, most cost-effective and time-effective way to do it.
Cool. And speaking of cost effective, I'm
Mhm.
assuming you want to mention it here and you're
Yes.
happy to mention it here, but I think you've put together a little bit of a code and
Yes,
whatnot, right?
so there's a code which is £30 off for anybody joining either the menopause course or the original course. So the
Right.
normal price is £225, so that takes it down to
Mhm.
195. That's also lifetime access and free access to the support group as well at the moment. So it's a good
Awesome.
time to join if you're struggling.
Great. I'll link that somewhere so people can click it. I can't say exactly where, it depends on my technological
Yeah,
abilities, but it'll be in the show notes or something
brilliant.
somewhere. So I just want to finish with saying, thank you so much for joining and having this conversation with me. I personally can say I've took loads away from this. I've learned loads. I found it very insightful and just very different to a lot of the information that's out there on sleep. So I'm genuinely very, very appreciative.
Brilliant.
Um, Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm hoping we'll get together again and talk
Yeah,
some more because I know there's lots of other things here that we could probably dip into.
yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been really, really interesting conversation.